They were provided an ability to be in the most posh sanctuary jurisdiction maybe in the world. And obviously it's sad that Martha's Vineyard people deported them the next day. They could have absorbed this. They chose not to. If 50 was a burden on one of the richest places in our country, what about all these other communities that have been overrun with hundreds or thousands?
What's up, my friends? How's it going? So you just heard Governor Ron DeSantis explain some of his justification as to why he sent a bunch of migrants from San Antonio to Martha's Vineyard. And this is the subject of today's episode. It's going to be a great episode. You're going to learn a lot about constitutional law, about this jurisdiction of suing the governor of Florida. There's a class action that was filed against him for sending these migrants from Texas to Martha's Vineyard. I might be a little more excited than usual because tonight I am going to an Elton John concert. I'm freaking the Rocket Man. I love Elton John, so I'm super excited. My 14-year-old son got me somehow really back into Nirvana. Anyone remember that group from the 90s? And Kurt Cobain. So I don't know how it is, but these the high schoolers these days, I love it. They like Nirvana. So I got back into the Nirvana songs, and I'm excited. So I'm going to try to hold back some of the excitement as I talk about these constitutional issues and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Okay, so let me set this up. Let me explain kind of what happened here. So Venezuela has been under a lot of, political corruption, economic disaster. COVID was a nightmare in Venezuela. Since the year 2002, they've had the same regime, this Hugo Chavez regime, right? And he was a dictator, and he just ruined the economy. Was very corrupt. He went after political opposition, very aggressively. And then he died in 2013. And then the current president, who was his vice president, Maduro, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, then became the president in 2013. And he has been, he's kind of ineptly, corruptly ruled ever since, right? So Venezuela's had all these problems. In some reports, like UN reports and humanitarian groups, something like 6 million people have fled out of Venezuela in the past 7 or 8 years. And it's a lot of people. In fact, it's something like 1/5 of their whole population has just fled. I mean, it's been bad. And a lot of Venezuelans left to Colombia. And then there have been these violent clashes between groups in Colombia and groups in Venezuela. And not necessarily like governmental groups in Colombia, just like these different factions. So it has been, a nightmare situation, right? So of these 6 million refugees that have left, a lot of them, have come to the United States, right? A lot went to Mexico and Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, and a lot obviously came to the United States. And most of them came through Mexico, right? I mean, right, obviously, traveling north. And from there, they would go to California and Texas, Arizona. So the Texas one, it got very, very political, right? The governor of Texas started getting upset and claiming that the federal government wasn't doing enough to help the state of Texas with these migrants. And what he did, this is Governor Abbott, what he started doing as a kind of a, symbol or kind of get the message out there is he started busing a lot of these immigrants that ended up in Texas. He started busing them to Chicago, New York, Washington, D.C. And I did do a whole episode on that, about that, his policies as Governor Abbott of Texas. Then something really crazy happened. So the governor of Florida then spent millions of dollars having some migrant, about 50, flown from San Antonio to Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, okay? And this is the subject of then a big federal lawsuit, over that. So what he did, it was like an operation or a movie script, what the governor of Florida tried to do, okay? Or actually what he did do All right. So how did he get 50 migrants to like sign these waivers and sign these documents saying, okay, we will agree to be flown to Massachusetts from San Antonio? Because keep in mind, as they crossed the border, they ended up in Texas, right? And a lot of them then in Texas, they applied for asylum, and it's a legal channel to apply for asylum by coming to the United States. They're not technically illegal aliens until if they're, denied asylum and then they stay here, for example. So they're in the immigration legal system, so to speak, right? They're applying for asylum. So they're not necessarily here illegally, or depending on who you ask, right? So anyway, so to get 50 of them to sign off on being flown to Martha's Vineyard, there was this agent named Perla Huerta, okay? And he hired her to recruit 50 migrants. And this is crazy because she's not just like a regular person. I mean, listen to this. So this young lady, okay, maybe she's not that young. She served in the U.S. Army for 20 years, okay? She was a combat medic specialist, and she was also counterintelligence for the Army, and she was deployed to Iraq, at least on 2 tours, and then Afghanistan on, 5 tours. She even went to Africa working as a counterintelligence to Djibouti. She's counterintelligence, right? So she's a big shot. She ended up leaving the United States military. She was honorably discharged, and somehow she makes her way to working for the Florida governor, right? And then he hired her, or the state of Florida hired her. I don't know if he met with her, personally. So the state of Florida hires her to go to Texas to get these, migrants to sign paperwork saying, okay, I agree to be flown to Martha's Vineyard, okay? And the way she did it was very crazy. It's not like she could go and get 50 people all at once. So she started recruiting some of them. And then as soon as they kind of signed on, then she would put them up in hotels for free until she got like 50 of them. And she had these migrants, she promised them things like, oh, or you're going to get a $10 gift certificate to McDonald's when you get there, to Massachusetts. You're going to get, free education. You're going to get the immigration help. You're going to, be put up in nice places. We're going to get you on your way to becoming a U.S. citizen, all the stuff, right? So she kind of promised them all these things and, to get them to sign off. And as soon as they did, then she would put them up in hotels, until she would round up about 50 of them. And then when she got 50 migrants, mostly they were Venezuelan. When she got it, or either most of them were Venezuelan or all of them. There's some conflicting reports about that. But at the very least, most of them were Venezuelan. All right. As soon as she got about 50 of them that signed up for this, then the state of Florida had these 50 migrants, and some of them were kids, flown from San Antonio to Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. It's a big, long flight there. And this is crazy. Just the renting 2 airplanes, chartered airplanes, the cost was way over $600,000. So if you look at way over $600,000 for 50 migrants, it was something like $13,000 each passenger, all right? And that's in addition to all the extra fees of the state of Florida. So they obviously spent a lot of money, way over $1 million in this operation just to get 50 people from Texas to Martha's Vineyard, okay? And now, when they got to Martha's Vineyard, these 50 people show up from Venezuela unannounced because nobody knew they were coming. This is where the things get kind of goofy. All right. So the residents of Martha's Vineyard, let me tell you a little bit about Martha's Vineyard. It's this beautiful island in Massachusetts, and it's very small, and there's 17,000 residents, about 17,000 residents, and it's beautiful. Okay, just look at some of these pictures of it. For those of you listening on Spotify as opposed to watching on YouTube, what I'm displaying is some beautiful freaking pictures of Martha's Vineyard. It's freaking paradise. So these 50 migrants end up in Martha's Vineyard, and they were treated very nicely by the residents there. They were given given food. They all got a place to stay that night that they were there. They got, open hugs and everything. Everything was beautiful. Now, this is the part. I did a lot of research and I couldn't freaking figure it out. It was very secretive. I don't know how they did it. But then in less than 2 days, okay, it was like something like 40 hours, all right? Or 44 hours, something like that. In less than 2 days, the Martha's Vineyard people found a way to get those migrants the heck out of Martha's Vineyard, all right? They sent them out of paradise in less than 2 days. And where did they locate them to? A military camp in another part of Massachusetts, all right? So they went from this, okay, for the people at home not watching, these beautiful pictures of Martha's Vineyard, to this, okay? I am now displaying a picture of the military camp, and it's basically like a prison, or maybe a nicer set than a prison, okay? Some of the people were trying to tell them, oh, it's like a dormitory. No, it is not like a dormitory. I lived in a dorm at UCLA, and it looked a lot better than this, all right? So anyway, I don't know how. I researched the heck out. If any of you folks know how they did it, how they were able to get these migrants the heck out of Martha's Vineyard, in less than 2 days and into a military camp, that I gotta know this. Okay, so anyway, some of it was they made national news. President Biden came involved and said, "Oh, this is a tragedy." It made it in national or international news. Now, by the way, get this little joke. When I started teaching law about, oh my God, I'm old. It was over 20 years ago. I used to have one of my many, many jokes as I would tell the law students, I'd say, listen, if you want to become popular here in San Diego and all of California, here's how you can become popular overnight. Request to open up a homeless shelter in La Jolla, all right? La Jolla is this beautiful part of San Diego. It's on the beach. It's where you see San Diego is and some of the most expensive homes in the country. Because if you try to open up a homeless shelter in La Jolla, you will get knocked the heck out, all right? The mayor of San Diego, the governor, and at one point when Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor, I used to have a joke, be like, if you try to do that, you'll get a call from the governor. You cannot do this over here, Okay, so anyway, this is what the governor of Florida did, right? So he sent these migrants to Martha's Vineyard, and somehow they were able to get those migrants the heck out of Martha's Vineyard. In less than 2 days, they got all their asses out of there, okay? And then came the, like a legal fallout, all right? My friend Zeke, okay, he's also one of the producers here. He goes, well, man, Florida, so there's a lot of people in Florida that are immigrants, and they're, kind of Ron DeSantis has this tough stance on immigrants. And I have a theory about that. And that my theory is, now I was born in Iraq, right? So my family immigrated here in the 1980s to America. And for some reason, a lot of times immigrants, after about 20 years of living here, they have a tougher stance on immigrants. I'm not saying myself, I'm just saying a lot of other immigrants. In fact, I think, with my fellow Iraqi Americans, they seem to hate when immigrants come to America. And I always say, I'm like, wait, where were you born, dude? You know what I'm saying? And trust me, it's not like the descendants of the Pilgrims would come out and say, we got to help these Venezuelans. They're immigrants just like our ancestors were when they came to America from England. That I've never heard that said before, Okay, so anyway, then comes this ginormous lawsuit, this federal lawsuit against Governor DeSantis, the Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, right? And what's going on here is that he's getting sued for running this whole operation, okay? And I'm going to kind of now start dissecting this, all right? Now, the one odd thing is that he got sued as the governor of Florida, and then he got sued in his personal capacity. What the heck does that mean, okay? It's an odd one in the sense that if he's getting sued as the governor of Florida, then only, and if he was to lose, so to speak, only the the state of Florida would have to pay, or the state of Florida would get, have to pay damages or get punished or whatever. So if he's getting sued in his personal capacity, the stakes are a lot higher, because let's say that, as the governor, and he was an attorney before then, and he made a ton of money. And oh, by the way, if you want to know a whole history of Governor DeSantis, I did do an episode on when he passed that "Don't Say Gay" bill, and then kind of like detailed the history and the background of Ronald DeSantis, and that's a previous episode. I'll also put that in the links. Okay, so they're suing him personally, meaning if he was to lose, in theory, he would have to pay out his personal money. So let's say he's saved and accumulated, he bought a couple houses and saved a bunch of money. Let's just say he has, $2 million of personal assets, right? So they're suing him personally, like his own personal money, okay? So, so anyway, so in addition to suing the state of Florida, they're also suing Ron DeSantis personally. All right. So so the allegations go like this. And this is another little tidbit about this particular lawsuit. The people, they didn't want to list their actual names, these migrants, because the lawyers feared that there would be, death threats or threats against them. So in law, when you want to use an alias in a lawsuit, or let's say somebody crashed into crashed their car into your car, but, they ran off or something. If you don't know their names, or you don't want to use their names, or if, in a case if there's like a rape victim, you don't want to use her name, for example, you could just use John Doe. Or if it's a female, you could, if you want, use Jane Doe. It's kind of like a fictitious name that you could use. These folks, I think for whatever reason, instead of using John or Jane Doe, they used their actual first names, and they went with Pablo Doe and Jesus Doe. All right. When I first saw this, I saw Jesus Doe. I've never seen Jesus Doe. And then I realized, it's referring to one of the Venezuelans. So probably pronounced better as Jesus Doe and Janet Doe. Okay. I've never seen it. I've never seen any Doe. Now we got John Doe has a cousin named Jesus Doe. That's new for me. In my 22 plus years of legal experience, that was the first time I saw that. Okay. So anyway, so now we have these John Doe defendants. Okay, they didn't want to use their personal name. Now, by the way, they that was challenged. They wanted their actual names released in the lawsuit, but the federal judge in Massachusetts said no, they could proceed on this lawsuit with these aliases. Okay, pseudonyms, is that what it's called when it's a fake name? Pseudonym? All right, or these aliases, I call them. They could go under these aliases so that people don't know their actual real names. Okay, fine. So they can pursue the lawsuit that way. Now let me explain the actual lawsuit. They filed this in the state of Massachusetts. Okay, for obvious reasons, they didn't want to sue the governor of Florida in Florida. They sued him in the state of Massachusetts. Okay. And the allegations kind of go like this, that this kind of operation that the governor of Florida did, it was deceitful. It was, a flat out fraud. It discriminated against these people because they sought out, Venezuelans as opposed to, white Americans or something. Okay. And that it violated their constitutional rights by, forcing them to go from one state to another state. And it violated their constitutional rights by discriminating based on ethnicity and nationality. All right. And so those are the allegations. And then other ones, those are the constitutional allegations, meaning those are the allegations of how the governor of Florida violated the Constitution. Then what I call the other allegations would be allegations like, basically just breach of contract. Breach of contract meaning they were promised one thing and they got something else. Okay, that's I call that a breach of contract allegation. That's a lower offense, so to speak, right? So the big one is obviously you violated the Constitution. And then the backup causes of action, so to speak, is and you didn't give these guys a $10 McDonald's card. You didn't give them the free education you promised. Those are the lesser allegations. Okay, so what I'm going to be addressing is this whole constitutional lawsuit. Okay, now the first order of business is this. In the Um, I remember this very vividly, and I've talked about this on other episodes, right? And I remember it was the mid 1990s. I was a college. This is before I went to law school at Berkeley. When I was a college student at UCLA, I took it was like a constitutional law class when I was in college, right? And I remember so vividly the Professor Bowman. Okay, I loved it. He was a great professor, and he used to always say, the first order of business in a lawsuit is jurisdiction. If you're the defendant, you always want to challenge jurisdiction. All right. And it took me, this is 30 years ago or about 30 years ago. And it has taken me probably about 30 years to understand how significant that is. All right. So in this particular lawsuit, the first order of business is jurisdiction. And let me explain how this lawsuit is going to happen. Okay. So it was filed in September 2022. The issue of jurisdiction may take a few freaking years, all right? The first thing that the governor of Florida is going to do is say that jurisdiction is not proper in a federal court in the state of Massachusetts, okay? And then for you young lawyers or law students, okay, it's it's a grueling argument, right? Because you want to say that a federal judge in the state of Massachusetts does not have the constitutional authority to, rule against the state of Florida. Okay. Ron DeSantis is a citizen of the state of Florida. And the argument being that the state of Massachusetts does not have, it's called a personal jurisdiction. Like they don't have the state of to be sued in the federal court in the state of Massachusetts, you need the state of Massachusetts to have kind of authority over you. Because in theory, if then you're ordered to pay money or you're, ordered to serve time or something, it's going to be, officials in the state of Massachusetts that are going to arrest you or take your assets or whatever it is, right? So it's kind of like there's this theory. It's like, okay, does the state of Massachusetts have personal jurisdiction over you? Here, I don't think it does. Okay, I do not think that the proper jurisdiction is in the state of Massachusetts. Because gosh darn it, who are they suing? They're suing the state of freaking Florida. Okay, and you could have it has been argued for centuries if you could sue a state in a federal court. That has been adjudicated where you can, okay? If you can prove the state violated a federal law, then you could sue them in a federal court, okay? But you still have to be in the correct court. Now, why the heck am I spending so much time talking about this? Is because this may decide who wins the freaking lawsuit, right? Because these migrants are going to have a much tougher chance winning their case in the state of Florida than they will in the state of Massachusetts, right? Because the state of Massachusetts, out of nowhere, they were kind of a pawn in all of this, right? Just so, the governor of Florida can send his message that, hey, all of you states up north are screwing the states down south by not, letting immigrants come in here, but putting the burden of housing them and taking care of them and everything on the southern states, right? So he used the state of Massachusetts as a pawn, right? Now, by the way, what the heck? They weren't even in the state of Florida, these 50 migrants. His only excuse was, well, maybe one day they would come to the state of Florida. So we wanted to send them to Massachusetts from Texas. That's pretty weak, by the way. But anyway, they will lose, I think, their lawsuit for sure if they have to go to Florida. Imagine telling a Florida jury, hey, this is unfair, right? The Florida jury would probably say, what the hell, dude? He should have sent 5,000 people up there, right? Whereas if the lawsuit goes in the state of Massachusetts, I think obviously their chances of winning is a lot better, right? Because the people in Massachusetts are not going to be that thrilled that this guy in Florida forced them to, what's it called? Take care of these people and kind of made Martha's Vineyard look ugly in the sense that it's like they kind of took these people in and got them the heck out of Martha's Vineyard in less than 2 days, right? They went to a military camp and it just looked bad on the state of Massachusetts, right? So it's pretty freaking clear that they're not like a jury and a judge and whatever in Massachusetts are not going to react well to the state of Florida and Ron DeSantis, right? Okay. So that's the first order of business. But the reason why that takes a couple of years is because this lawsuit, it's kind of how the system is built. And that system goes like this. This lawsuit is in the lowest level. It's called the trial court level in the federal government. So this federal judge in this case will make a decision. That decision could be, if that judge rules correctly, right, I think the judge will say that this particular venue does not have jurisdiction. If you want to sue Governor DeSantis, go to Florida, right? If that's the decision, then theoretically the plaintiffs, the immigrant Jesus Doe, right, and represented by this law firm called, I like their name of the law firm, the Lawyers for Civil Rights. It's a cool name, all right? Lawyers for Civil Rights law firm, okay? So if he is, if it's adjudicated that he can't be sued in the state of Massachusetts in the federal court there, the plaintiffs may file an appeal. And then that appeal will go to the Circuit Court of Appeals. It's a much higher, authority. And that will take a couple years. If they rule it correctly, they'll say that this isn't the proper jurisdiction. And then in theory, it could be appealed from the Circuit Court of Appeal to the United States Supreme Court. And then they take a couple years to decide it, okay? One thing that used to kill me as a law student is I would read these cases in 40 minutes or an hour or whatever it was. Maybe we'd talk about it in class, maybe it'd be on a final exam. And that was about it. Like, it was very short. And then when I started practicing law, what killed me was like, man, these cases take years to be adjudicated. And this is some of the reason why. So then the United States Supreme Court could decide to take the case, or they could decide to not take the case. And then, so all of that will be a few years of litigation. And FYI, we haven't even discussed the case. We've only discussed what? Jurisdiction, right? And now I could see why Professor Bowman at UCLA used to always say the first order of business is like we argue over jurisdiction, because that will be a major factor in who's going to win the whole case, right? Okay. And one time, I think it was Mateo or said it was like, who has home field advantage? You could kind of think of it that way, Obviously, the state of Florida will want to be sued in the state of Florida, right? Because that's their home field advantage, and that's a good way of saying it. Okay, now if the case after it gets through this jurisdictional thing, whether it's adjudicated in Massachusetts or what I think would be the proper place for adjudication, which is the state of Florida, when it's adjudicated there, then we deal with what we call the substantive issues, all right? The substantive issues is, let's go over the freaking case. Did the state of Florida and Governor DeSantis violate these good people's constitutional rights? Okay. Now, let's go over that. The first thing I want to address is them suing the governor in his personal capacity. And then they also sued the Secretary of the Florida Department of Transportation, Jared Perdue, and they sued him in his official capacity and in his personal capacity. So same thing, they're suing these two folks, for their personal assets, okay? Now, first things first, I will say that is a bad idea because they're going to lose that every time, all right? And it's very well-known law that if a government official acts in his or her official capacity, then they cannot be held personally liable, all right? It's like, come on, my fellow lawyers, like, look alive here a little bit. That's worse than a rookie mistake to sue them in their personal capacity. I know the message you're trying to send, but come on, like, let's follow the law like a little bit. You're going to lose that. It's 100% loser because it's kind of like this. if Ron DeSantis, after he gets off work and let's say he goes on a vacation, he meets Ted Cruz in Cancun or whatever, right? And he's on vacation and he, is driving too fast when he's on vacation and, whatever, he hits a pedestrian or he runs into another car. Then you can sue the governor in his personal capacity, right? Because he's not acting as a governor. This is like personal life, right? But when he's sending migrants and using the state's money and sending them from Texas to Massachusetts, and it's like kind of like through a state program, and it's obviously in his official capacity. It's a no-brainer. Like I don't even know why I'm discussing it this long, right? It's just a bad idea. So I think substantively they're certainly going to lose that. That's a no-brainer. Now we get to the other points. So they sued the governor of Florida for these constitutional violations. And let me get to those, all right? Let's see, they're called causes of action. And we're going to first discuss these constitutional causes of action. By the way, some of these people, they had interesting stories, like the Yanette Doe. She and her husband and their 11-year-old son fled Venezuela in July of 2022, and they got to Texas in September 2022, and they were some of the ones that were recruited by Perla Huerta. Okay, Jesus Doe, same thing. He's from Venezuela, and he was recruited by Miss Huerta to go to Martha's Vineyard. Okay, now comes the final constitutional violations. Okay, first cause of action. Violation of the Fourth Amendment, illegal seizure, false arrest. So what they're alleging here is this. They're alleging that the governor of Florida basically seized these people, arrested them under color of law, and detained them by having them stay in these hotel rooms, and then having them, be on the flight, and then having their lives relocated and all that jazz. I mean, there's a theory that, like a search and seizure, if you stop somebody, and then you don't let that guy go, and then let's say you search his car illegally, or you search him illegally, or you're just detaining him illegally, and you're just kind of like keep him there for an hour, and you ask him questions or whatever it is, and you don't let him go. That is the Fourth Amendment right. You can't just kind of stop someone or seize someone too long. Okay. The governor's defense against this is that we gave them paperwork. They knew where they were headed. They were free to go. They were free to stay. They were free to do whatever the heck they wanted. I think the governor of Florida will win that one. I don't think that the plaintiffs will prove that the state of Florida illegally detained them. Okay, that is a constitutional violation if a government official illegally detains you. Okay, that's a major constitutional violation. Okay, like an example, like I said, would be if they kind of think, oh, this guy may have robbed a liquor store 3 days ago, and they just go to that guy's house and hold him down or something, and then keep asking him questions without a search warrant or without an arrest warrant, right? That would be a major violation. That is an illegal seizure. I don't think that is what happened here. Okay, the next one is this violation of due process, and this one under the 14th Amendment. What they're saying here is this. There is a law, the 14th Amendment and the right of due process. Before you take someone's property or money or, whatever, you put them in prison or whatever you do, you have to give them due process, meaning you can't put someone in prison unless you give them a fair trial, right? Due process. You can't take somebody's land without giving them due process. It's called eminent domain. Like if they want to extend a freeway or something, they can't just take someone's property to take the freeway. They have to have a due process provision, which is they offer money for it. If he doesn't accept it, they go to court. The court determines what's a fair amount. Then they could take the guy's property and expand the freeway. All right, that's called due process. So this allegation is that the state of Florida violated these people's, liberty and rights. Okay, and their liberty being that they could stay in Texas. All right, the liberty being that they could do what they want to do, and that they force these people to go to the state of Massachusetts and then ultimately in a freaking military camp in the state of Massachusetts without proper due process. Because in theory, if you want to extradite somebody from Texas to Massachusetts, you don't just send them on a plane. You have to give them due process, meaning they should have a lawyer. They should understand their rights. They should understand that they don't have to go to Massachusetts if they don't want to, right? So that's the next allegation, a very major allegation that they violated these people's due process by sending them from one state to another without giving them all of these rights, okay? I think this one is potential. There's a potential there. And I think it's close enough where if they stay in Massachusetts, they probably win that one. In the state of Florida, I don't think they're going to win that one, you know? All right, the next one is this equal protection, all right, under the 14th Amendment. And by the way, I think they would win the other one is because I think they should have gotten more explanation. You know, I think they should have gotten more explanation as to what was going on because the immigrants didn't know that this was the state of Florida doing all this. You know what I'm saying? I think they should have known that. And I think that the due process one, I think they may have a point there that they may win in a court. Okay, but like I said, they'll win in Massachusetts, that one, but not in Florida. The next one is this equal protection clause. All right, now you're learning a lot about the constitutional law. There's a constitutional law, this 14th Amendment. Equal protection just means that you can't discriminate against a protected class like gender, religion, nationality, okay? So what they're saying here is that the state of Florida, discriminated against these people because they were Venezuelan. They didn't go after white people. They didn't go after Canadian Americans. They went after just Venezuelans. I don't know. That one is pretty close, but again, I don't think that they would win that in Florida, but I do think they would win that in Massachusetts because it did seem like they went after just these Venezuelans, right? They didn't go after Cubans, right? And we know why, because the governor of Florida would have looked pretty freaking bad when a lot of his population is Cuban Americans. It would look pretty bad to go after Cubans. It would look pretty bad to go after Canadians. It would look pretty bad, blah, 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 blah. So he went after Venezuelans, right? And used them as a kind of political thing. I think that one they would win in Massachusetts, maybe not in Florida. Okay, the next order of business, let me go through some of these. This one about the violation of the supremacy clause, meaning that all immigration choices should be the federal government, not a state government. So by trying to get immigrants from Texas to Florida, a state government tried to do something that was only within the purview of the federal government. I don't think they're going to win that because there's a lot of times where state governments have to decide, immigration issues in terms of where people are going to be housed and where they're going to live, that type of thing. All right, then let's see, that was the kind, this one was a good one. This isn't a constitutional one, but this one was just kind of a violation of federal law, but not constitutional law. This is the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, the coronavirus state fiscal so what happened was this money was given to the state of Florida for coronavirus relief. So the federal government gave it to the state of Florida, and it was in the act, the congressional act that said we're going to give you each state all this amount of money, and you have to do it for this like COVID relief. So I don't know how the heck the COVID relief fund went into transferring 50 migrants from Texas to Massachusetts, especially for Florida relief. The governor's position is that, hey, we were worried that these people would eventually come to Florida. So we wanted to send a message, I guess. I don't know. That one, I don't think the state of Florida is going to be able to win. Okay? They may have some defenses, but I just don't see it happening. But that's not a constitutional issue. That's just kind of like this congressional act. All right? I think that the plaintiffs may have action there. But the problem is that the plaintiffs they don't have what's called standing for that one, and I think they'll lose on that issue. Which means if the state of Florida wrongfully used federal money, then these migrants can't complain about that because that should be an issue between the federal government and the state of Florida. So let the federal government sue the state of Florida if it wants to, but these plaintiffs don't have standing to sue the state of Texas for misappropriating money from the federal government. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think that the plaintiffs would lose that one. The ones I do think that the plaintiffs have a good shot at are those minor issues, the ones that what I said, the non-constitutional ones, things like breach of contract or, deceit. And then what's called intentional infliction of emotional distress. That one, I think those are minor issues in the grand scheme of things. And I think they have good cases for that because they were lied to. They weren't given full disclosures. It was obviously the secretive plan to get them, to use them as this kind of political message, type of thing without explaining all of that to them. And it's almost like like I said, like a breach of contract. I think that one they have a good case for, but it's very minor. It's not like the constitutional violations. The constitutional violations would get a lot more money, and then the state of Florida have to pay their attorney fees, and it would just be a disaster for the state of Florida to violate constitutional rights. And it could have, theoretically, criminal implications for violating those kind of constitutional rights. I think that this one, the minor ones, I think the plaintiffs have a good case for. I think they could win, but it's going to be a smaller amount. I mean, that's not the real gist of this lawsuit, is that these breach of contract claims. The real one is those constitutional violations. But I do think they're going to win those ones. All right. It's 2022. We're going to, what a bummer. I'm giving you predictions that come back to me in the year 2027 when all of this is said and done, and we'll know if Joe Samo is right or wrong. I wish it was more like football games where it's I predict that the Raiders will finally win this Sunday. We will have an answer on Sunday, right? But here I make this prediction and we'll know in the year 2027. I wish the law was a little faster, all right? But for reasons I mentioned, that's why it takes so long. Hey, please, anytime you have a question, feel free to run it by my lawyer, okay? Give me a call if you want, 619-672-1741, or email me, joe@samolaw.com, or leave a bunch of comments here. I love hearing from all you folks. And as always, I'll see you next week.